You are listening to the Lawyer Stories podcast with host Benny Gold. Lawyer Stories was founded in July 2017 and is an expanding global network of lawyers and law students sharing their personal journeys to the noble profession of the practice of law. Join us on this podcast as we dig deeper into these stories and hear from lawyers and law students from around the world in all areas of the legal profession. Here at Lawyer Stories, we believe that every lawyer has a story. What's yours?
Welcome to the Lawyer Stories podcast with Benny Gold. Today we welcome in Jim LiCalzi, partner and Associate General Counsel at Duffy Duffy, PLLC in Uniondale, New York, focusing on med mal and personal injury. How you doing, Jim?
I'm doing great, Benny. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, it's great to have you on here. I know you've been involved with some interesting cases lately. So this is Lawyer Stories, so we do like to go back and a little bit through the why you became a lawyer. So tell us, can I make the assumption that you are a New Yorker?
I'm a New Yorker, born and bred, and actually still living in the house that I was born in. So,
really?
Yes.
That's amazing. So just how does that happen?
Well, I was born in 1969, and my parents owned the home, and then I took it over from them, or took it from them, in about 9 years ago. So
you know what? I have to say that's not a bad move. I mean, I have one of my best friends lived on Long Island in Plainview, and and all these other places. I know that it's not, it's pretty highly priced out there, and it's probably not even that, but it's probably hard to find a good place to live.
Well, Benny, I still am friends with the same guys that I went to grade school with. So
that's the best. That's the best. And now you're helping them through. I mean, I hate to say it, but if anybody has a really rough patch in their life, you're there for them. You're there for all the people who you know from growing up in the community. I think there's something to be said for that, right? Like sticking around and practicing law, like where you were from.
100%. And I know you're going to get into it in a minute, but I come from a family of physicians.
Okay.
My uncles, my father, my cousin, and I always was fascinated by medicine. But growing up, I just, when I was in college, I tend to gravitate more towards the law, and I kind of melded the two.
Okay.
When I got into medical malpractice law, shortly after graduating law school. So
I think that's really interesting. So because they are doctors, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit. I don't know if that's a touchy area.
No, it's not.
For you a little bit.
It's really not, because after you discuss with some physicians, whether it be my father and my uncle, when you talk about certain things that happen and you actually show them these records on what happened, they can't believe it.
Okay. All right. So it's
become supporters.
So it's more I don't know if it rises to the level of egregious, but they would look at it from the standard of care and see that it wasn't there.
Correct.
So tell us that, do you have a distinct moment where you're okay, medicine, not really for me. I want to go the legal route. Sort of what kind of led to that moment?
Well, unfortunately, I probably wasn't as focused as I should have been on biology and organic chemistry in college.
Yeah,
so that assisted me in making the decision.
Okay.
But, I've always been.
What were you interested in it? You could say you weren't that focused on it, but the question really is, okay, you were interested in it. Then.
Always interested in it,
okay.
And in fact, when I was growing up and in high school, I actually worked as an orderly. My father was a surgeon. He was the chief of surgery at a local hospital here, so I was able to work as an orderly in the operating room. Getting operating rooms set up, cleaning up after surgeries. So I always had an interest in medicine.
Okay.
So that, but as I went through college, and I was always in a rush. I finished college in 3.5 years. I finished law school in 2.5 years.
Wow.
And the prospect of going to medical school, like I said, there's certain prerequisites in order to become a physician that you have to kind of grind through, even though you're never going to use it as a physician. But I love the law, and I love the melding of the law with medicine, and that's really what I focused my entire career on. And even though I'm a lawyer, I and I love the law. And when I handle cases, I handle them from the time a client contacts us, calls us, through trial. So I do everything. I do intakes, I do pleadings, I do motions. I handle everything, appeals, trials. But I'm always fascinated by the medicine and what happens to people. And I like helping people, and I like individuals. I like learning people's stories. I like learning what happened to them, especially these are terrible times, and
Terrible.
no one sees me for happy reasons.
Terrible.
You know?
Yeah, when this comes across your desk, you know somebody's been going through one of the worst times of their lives. And I think that says a lot. Like you mentioned that you take the case right from like inception of the case. And I know like I've been to your website, cool website, pretty big firm, like decent sized firm.
Yes.
So for you to be taking that and not just sort of throwing it off on somebody really kind of illustrates that like you really like to learn the story and get to know what the client is all about.
No, we have a great system. We every day there's an attorney who's assigned as the attorney of the day that you're handling, after someone calls and some basic information, potential client is obtained by one of our intake staff. It gets transferred to if it seems like it could be a potential case for us, it gets transferred to an attorney. So literally, when someone calls, there's an attorney is going to be getting on a phone with them if it's something that we think we can help them with.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's a great method. So I have to ask it, and I know you just explained it. I want to say and I know you're interested in medicine and your family of physicians, but like, why like the med mal section of it? Why not maybe like the defense or like and personal injury? Like, is there a reason behind that?
Sure. So actually, when I got out of law school, I worked for the county of Nassau as a deputy county attorney, doing defense work in regular, PI cases that ran the gambit from, a trip and fall to Nassau County, where I live, used to have a program where they would take roller skates to high schools and grade schools and have the kids roller skate on freshly waxed gym floors. So you can imagine that, crazy things happen from that. So I got in, my feet wet then, and then, I had a great opportunity. My father did some expert work, so I actually did work for a defense firm.
Oh, nice. Okay.
For a number of years for a great defense firm here on Long Island. I got a lot of great experience. I was able to, handle depositions, learn medicine, do motions. I actually handled trials. And then I had a really interesting opportunity. My partner, Mike Duffy, and I went to high school together. We weren't really friends, but we knew each other. And he had contacted me. His father, Jim Duffy, who unfortunately passed away at 83 in December of 2019, is a legendary plaintiff's medical malpractice lawyer in New York.
Okay.
Absolute legend.
Wow. Okay.
Unbelievable attorney, unbelievable individual. And Mike Duffy had a firm, his own firm, and his father decided to leave his long-term firm and go into business with him. And wow. Mike called me and said, I'm looking for someone who'd be willing to basically carry my father's bags and work directly for him. And that's how I jumped on the opportunity. I knew I love trials. I love being in the courtroom. So I knew there's no better person to learn from than Jim Duffy. So that's how I really got involved in the plaintiff side. And quite frankly, Benny, the idea, I respect doctors a lot. I had no problem working, for doctors, but working, billing and being under the thumb of an insurance company is not the greatest thing in the world.
Right. Right.
And again, once I started meeting with plaintiffs and learning their stories and learning what I really, the good that I could hopefully create out of a terrible situation. When I win a case, Benny, when I win a trial, when I get a great settlement for a client, it's very hard for me to say congratulations because there's no congratulations.
Right.
I don't have any crystal ball. I can't bring someone back to the time and rewind the clock. So it's not a congratulations. The hope is that the money can make someone's life easier if they're still alive, if the injured person is still there, or help compensate, a family with, especially if a mother or father die with young children, hopefully, compensate the survivors for their loss and to make their life a little easier. So that's really kind of what I was attracted to. And then once I had the opportunity to work for Jim Duffy, I jumped at it. And I've been at Duffy and Duffy since January of 2001. So it's been a long
Wow.
time.
And by the way, I think like you said you knew him from high school, but you weren't really like that. I think you have some like amazing marketing angles too. Like if you were, I always kind of thought of this, like if I was to do something like that, like if you were on like the same sports team or like obviously you went to the same school, you could totally do the whole community. I mean, tell me what it's like and I know I just mentioned it earlier in the episode a few minutes ago, but like tell me what it's like to be able to help people from the community that you grew up in.
It's fantastic. I love New York. I love Long Island. I love the city, and the diversity of the individuals, the backgrounds. I love people's stories.
Yep.
I love hearing a story about how people's family. My grandfather came from Sicily. When he was 13 years old by himself, never went back, never saw his family again, and worked hard. So when I meet people and I hear their stories. Everyone has a story.
That's so true. We
Everyone
know
has,
that here that everybody has a story. Yes.
everyone has a story. And, everyone says New York is a melting pot. It truly is.
Yeah.
There's all different types of people from, I've represented, you know, C-suite executives to, unemployed mothers. So it runs the gambit from infants to elderly people. So I really do enjoy hearing people's stories, meeting them, and hopefully being able to help them in their time, usually the most time of need in their entire lives.
Yeah, totally. So if somebody wants to get into med mal or personal injury, what advice would you give them?
Well, the advice, first of all, is recognize it's a grind. All right. So it's not 9 to 5. But if you're willing, it's very rewarding, especially when you can work for yourself. It's very rewarding. But I would work at a firm, intern. Get your feet wet when you're either in high school or college. We always have interns every summer. Some high school, some college,
Really?
some middle school. Yeah,
That's
every
great.
summer we always have a few interns, and it may be just you're doing administrative work or you're processing authorization so we can obtain records, but you're in the environment. You hear
Right.
things being said.
You hear things. Yep.
Yeah,
Totally.
you get to read things that you maybe, now it used to be, when I was in law school, I worked as a file clerk at a law firm, and you could actually have to file the paper. Now everything's done electronically. So you're really not filing anymore, but when things are filed electronically with the court system, you get to, read some things here and there. So you get exposed to it. And if it's something that you think you're interested in, then you can, do clinics in law school, continue to intern, and then just, work your ass off when you get out to try to find a job and just be ready to do all the little things.
Yeah. No, totally. That sounds like people can get some good opportunity at Duffy and Duffy. So that's terrific. So on October 21st, 22, news broke in the Bronx area. We're going to talk about a case here that you secured an $80 million verdict on behalf of your client, who is a profoundly disabled man. Can you just kind of take us through the facts of that case? It gets sort of medical a little bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Let me start by at least giving you a little bit about the background.
Background.
So,
I feel like you know what I like. I like asking you this. I feel like I'm in law school, like the professor, like Socratic method. Excuse me, Mr. LiCalzi, can I please have the facts of the case?
Well, it's interesting because it's not just the facts.
Yeah.
It's the procedural history of how this whole came about.
Right.
It's very interesting. So Hakeem was born in May of 2003 to a really lovely woman, Teresa, his mom, who had 6 prior pregnancies. One of them was a miscarriage, 5 live births before she was pregnant with Hakeem. And Hakeem was born, and he had extremely premature at 23 weeks gestation. So in 2003, it's really not much different now. 24 weeks gestation was considered really viable.
Mhm.
A baby being able to live outside of the mother's womb with assistance. So in 2003, as today, a 23-week baby is considered to be extremely premature. And as of 2003, and again, it's really not different in 2022, 70% of children born at 23 weeks will die.
Mm.
Of the 30% who survive, the vast majority of them have profound disabilities, whether it be cerebral palsy, intellectual deficits. Hakeem, he's got cerebral palsy. He's able to walk. It took him close to 9 years to learn how to walk on his own.
And we're talking gestation. I should know this because my daughter just turned.
Yeah.
I have a son, but gestation is what? Is it 40 weeks or is God?
40 weeks? Yeah, really, 38 to 40 weeks is considered.
And so this baby was being born at 23.
23 weeks.
Okay.
And we had 9 during the course of the trial. We had 9 medical experts testify. Every single one testified that when a baby's at 23 weeks, literally every day in utero makes a profound difference.
Wow.
In the outcome.
Okay.
Right? It's something like it's a 3 or 4%. The chances increase 3 to 4% of surviving each day that you're in utero. And the reason, I start here with Hakeem's story is that Hakeem was born extremely premature because his mother had something called an incompetent cervix.
Okay.
It's now the American College of Obstetrics and Gynecology have now changed the name to cervical insufficiency, but they mean the same thing. Essentially, what it means is there's a mechanical problem with the woman's cervix, which is the lower part of her uterus. And actually, it connects the uterus to the vagina.
Okay.
And actually, the opening that when a baby's born vaginally, the baby comes out of the uterus through the cervix, which is supposed to dilate and efface and open up, so the baby can pass into the vaginal canal and be delivered. And when a woman has an incompetent cervix, it's really not something that you can diagnose with a test. It's based on a woman's history.
Okay.
And the history is if her cervix opens, it dilates before, either at the end of the first trimester or beginning of the second trimester. Trimesters are about 12 to 14 weeks. There's 3 trimesters in a pregnancy. It begins to dilate and open, and a baby, it's typically through miscarriages around 18, 19, 20 weeks. The baby just comes out and there's no labor, there's no contractions. The cervix just opens, it's a mechanical issue, and the baby comes out.
So that happens. What's I might have missed it. Like, what's the actual cause? Like, that just comes.
I mean, there can be a number of different causes. One is some women just congenitally have a weak cervix.
Okay.
Women who have, whether it be an abortion or some other type of condition in the past that required them to have something called a dilatation and curettage, where there's a scrape where they open up manually, they dilate the cervix and they do a procedure. Those women can have an increased risk of developing incompetent cervix. With Miss Wilson, it just seems she had a weak cervix congenitally.
Was this a jury trial?
It was a jury trial.
Okay.
5 weeks.
How did you so my question, how do you present that to the jury? Because I'm over here saying, okay, I sort of caught a couple words there, but not really the medical terms. I kind of knew it.
Yeah, it's really it's a challenge, not just for me, Benny, but for all the attorneys in every medical malpractice case.
Yeah.
Through your experts, through the defendants, through questioning, from the time jury selection starts to the time you sit down after you completed your closing argument, it's about educating the jury as to these medical terms and medical issues.
Okay.
And listen, I've been doing this for a long time. I've been doing this for 30 years. Juries are smart. They this jury had a wide range of people in it, from someone who's a correction officer,
right,
to someone who's a mental health therapist, through somebody who's retired. So, if you take your time and if you properly present the evidence and explain medical terms, and it's repeated, not to the point where you're boring someone, but through a 5-week trial, there's a lot of opportunity to repeat things and go over things with different witnesses.
Okay, got
juries, my experience, I always tell juries during jury selection the same exact thing. People get that notice in the mail and they're like, I can't believe I have to come for jury selection. It's the last thing I want to do. But when they come, and if it's an appropriate case for them, obviously someone who has a medical malpractice lawsuit or has some type of ill will against plaintiffs in general or doctors, they're not going to be selected for the jury. But when people come and juries sit for jury duty and they get selected and they sit through a trial, they, I don't want to use the term enjoy it, but they appreciate it. They recognize that it is a civic duty of settling disputes in a civil manner through this litigation, through a jury trial. And they learn things. And at the end of the trial, the jurors, they hug each other because they spend 5 weeks of their life or 2 weeks of their lives together. Yeah. They end up developing relationships. So I really do feel it's a great system. And juries, again, through proper presentation, I do everything electronically on my iPad. I present everything, the records, diagrams. This courtroom was actually equipped with a big TV, big screen TV. So the jury got to see everything and they learn.
So they understand. Like me as a juror, I think my biggest question would be like, why did the baby come out so quick? I mean, it's that simple, right? Like I'd be like, why at 23 weeks did they come flying out? I shouldn't say flying out, but why did they come out?
But this woman, because of her past medical history, because she had all very premature births in the past, and some of the births, the dilatation, really a number of the births previously, the cervix became dilated without contractions. So that's the difference. You have contractions and dilate. That's different.
That's why it wasn't working. Okay, that I understand that. Okay,
correct.
That helps. So what's let me ask you that. How much studying goes into this? You must have had to study medical terms and
this case has been pending for a long time, and there's a number of reasons for that, but COVID being one of them. But I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for 30 years. Jim Duffy and my firm, we really specialize in handling a lot of neurologically impaired children cases involving, they call them, baby cases, cases involving labor and delivery. So, I've read the same textbooks that doctors, would be reading who are studying obstetrics and gynecology, neonatology, neuroradiology, pediatrics. So it just, I've been doing it for 30 years. And on top of that, whenever I have a particular case, I really fancy myself as on these small little issue involved. Like say here, there's something called an incompetent cervix and something that's very important that we discussed called a cerclage, which wasn't done. I think I know just as much as doctors know on that one little area, because I read texts, I get all the literature, and the literature changes over time. And unfortunately, a lot of medical literature is now bastardized to protect doctors. So some of the old medical literature is actually a lot more reliable than some of the new medical literature. But really what happened here is the child didn't have to be born extremely premature. Hakeem had a sibling, an older sister who was born 3 years before him, where the proper diagnosis of incompetent cervix was made. And Miss Wilson received this procedure called the cerclage, where they actually stitch in the cervix to help, increase the mechanical strength of it. And that became a big issue in the case. That was really the central issue in the case as to why it wasn't done in Hakeem's pregnancy and the reasons for that. And, the testimony in the case from my experts was certainly that if a cerclage was done, maybe Hakeem wasn't going to get to full term. Maybe he wasn't going to get to 37, 38 weeks. But the goal is to get the baby as far along as possible in the pregnancy to prevent the devastating consequences of an extremely premature birth at 23 weeks.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. So how old was Hakeem?
Yes.
When you took the case, when you filed suit, and I guess to ask you, to follow up with that also, did it take a while because you have to wait to see what the actual defect is?
At times it does. I mean, Hakeem was hospitalized for the first 16 months of his life and had a very stormy course. So there was no doubt how the injuries that he incurred at the time that he was born. However, one of the interesting things about this case in New York, and we could talk briefly about it later, but New York, the laws for physicians and healthcare providers in New York greatly favors them. Statute of limitations are less, right? So for a medical malpractice lawsuit, you have to bring it in 2.5 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
For an infant, a case involving an infant, anyone under the age of 18, you have a maximum of 10 years. So when the baby's born, you have 10 years to bring a lawsuit.
Yep.
However, this case was the defendant in this case was Jacoby Medical Center and its physicians, which is owned by the New York City Health and Hospital Corporation, which is a municipal corporation. And in New York, when you sue a municipal corporation, whether it be a city, a town, a village, or here, a medical entity,
yep,
you have to file a notice of claim within 90 days of the event and bring the lawsuit within a year and 90 days, or if it's an infant, bring the lawsuit within 10 years. Wow. But the condition precedent of this notice of claim has to be timely filed. And that was not done here because Miss Wilson, she's busy taking care of her child or visiting the hospital every day. Like I said, he was institutionalized in either a hospital or rehab facility for 16 months after he was born. So we didn't get the case referred to us. She consulted with a local attorney in the Bronx in 2010. So this is 7 years after he was born.
Wow. Okay.
So they came to us, and we had to get the medical records. We had to get them reviewed. We had to have an expert look in and see if there's a viable case. And once we determined, pretty quickly that there was, we have to bring an application to petition to file a late notice of claim.
Is that to waive the notice or something?
Yeah, basically you're asking the court to say this municipal entity had knowledge of the essential facts of the claim based upon the custodian of all these medical records that everyone's going to be relying on, that the child was profoundly disabled, and there's no prejudice. So please let us, file this notice of claim late. It's called nunc pro tunc, to accept it as timely, so we can then start the lawsuit. And the trial court, credit granted our application in 2011. So we filed the lawsuit. However, then the city appealed to the next layer of court in New York, which is called the appellate division. Mm-hmm. And they didn't make a decision until April of 2013, upholding the trial court's granting of this application to file late notice of claim. So by the time that we really started rolling with discovery and depositions and everything, it was already 2013, 2014. And we did all that discovery. And then another interesting thing, a twist in this case, is after we did all the discovery in 2015, the city of New York, which is responsible for the New York City Health and Hospital Corporation, decided to third party bring a lawsuit against St. Barnabas Hospital where Hakeem was delivered. Now, all the prenatal care was at Jacoby Medical Center, their high-risk clinic, but the mother experienced problems and was taken emergently to the nearest hospital, which was St. Barnabas Hospital, which is a private hospital unaffiliated with the city.
Mhm.
Now, here we are in 2015, and the city's starting a whole new lawsuit within our lawsuit.
Wow.
We're not responsible. St. Barnabas Hospital is responsible. And then after that, St. Barnabas Hospital sued its own doctors.
Really?
The reason they did that, not that they were blaming their doctors for what occurred, or for any medical malpractice, but the doctors have their own insurance policy.
Right.
So St. Barnabas said, you're really bringing a lawsuit against these individual doctors. We're going to bring them in so they can defend themselves. So here we are, now in 2016, where we have to start doing depositions all over again, because this third party action, third party action happened. So it was really a complicated procedural history.
Yeah, that sounds very complicated. So the first part of when you get one of these cases, the first thing you have to do procedurally is the notice of claim, right? After you evaluate whether or not you have a case.
Correct. And if it's not timely, if you're not within the window, you have to bring this application to seek the court's permission to file a late notice of claim, because that's a condition precedent to actually starting the lawsuit.
So what do you look for in a good suit? Like a lot of damages? Is that basically?
Well, listen, damages is certainly a big component of it, meaning someone could have the most egregious medical care in the world, but if they don't suffer injury from it, you don't have a lawsuit.
Right.
Certainly, damages are a big component. The other aspect is, based on my review and then consulting with medical experts, do I identify clear departures or deviations from the accepted standards of medical care?
Right.
And can we tie those departures to the injuries? Meaning, is there a causal link between them?
So maybe this is a difficult question to answer, but in your experience, what do you see that's departure from the norm? Why do these doctors have substandard practices? Why does it usually happen? Is it not paying attention? Are they on their phone?
You know what? I think most of the time it's not paying attention. My experience is, or they assume that because, something happened, but it's worked out okay another 10 times in the past, I really don't have to worry about it on this 11th time.
Okay.
And then there's a problem. For example, in this case, in 2000, Miss Wilson had a cerclage done in the prior pregnancy. And even though Hakeem's sister Lakima was delivered prematurely, she has no physical or mental deficits or intellectual deficits. She lives on her own now. She works. She graduated high school. So here with Hakeem, I really feel, and this is why the verdict was $80 million. I only asked for $38 million. The reason
really? Tell me more about that. So how old is Hakeem now, by the way?
Hakeem was 19 and a half at the time the trial finally happened.
Wow. So he's okay. So I don't know. How old is he? 20?
Yeah, no, he's 19 and he's going to be 20 in May of 2023.
So Jim LiCalzi goes up there and says, I want 30 million. And
38 million.
I want 38 mil. This is what we're looking for. And the jury comes back and says, here's 80.
Correct. And I spoke to the jury briefly afterwards, mostly just because Miss Wilson wanted to thank each one of them for really, it was a validation of Miss Wilson. I don't think Miss Wilson has been validated many times in her life.
Okay.
And now she was so appreciative that this jury of her peers believed her and believed in her and believed in her son and believed that this didn't have to happen. She was really quite emotional.
Wow.
She's really a lovely woman. She's devoted her entire life to caring for this young man. This young man, like I told you, he didn't walk for 9 years. He had what's called a tracheostomy or a breathing tube in his throat for the first 5 years of his life. He had a feeding tube. He couldn't, he was so premature when he was born. His body never learned how to eat and swallow. So he had this feeding tube in his abdomen until he was 8. He's nonverbal. He can make, say a few individual words, but he's nonverbal. He can't control his bowel or his bladder.
Mm.
He doesn't understand danger. He could run into the middle of the street if you're not careful. He can run out of his apartment.
Wow.
He tragically, a lot of children like Hakeem who have these neurocognitive deficits, they seek stimulation constantly, and his stimulation was banging his head.
Mm.
So he wore a helmet. He has big bruises on the front and back of his head from constantly banging his head. So she really devoted her entire life to caring for this baby. Now he's a young man, and she's going to be caring for him for the rest of his life because he can never live independently.
So, like, does the money that she won, does that bring in a worker 24 hours a day and that sort of thing?
Well, it will certainly assist in that. What interestingly,
Right.
even though the verdict was rendered, the case actually was settled during the jury deliberations for $7.75 million plus a waiver of a $2 million lien, except for about $10,000. So the total amount was about $9.75 million. In the first department where this case was pending, the most that's ever been upheld for pain and suffering in a medical malpractice case is $10 million. So, we thought it was a very good resolution. And the reason that the verdict happened is that the city was blaming a third party, St. Barnabas Hospital. And the jury was convinced that the jury was going to hold them responsible. So an agreement was reached during jury deliberations that this is the number the case is going to settle for. And if the jury allocates a certain percentage to St. Barnabas Hospital and its doctors, then they were going to be paying that percentage. No allocation occurred. They found that the city was 100% responsible.
Wow.
I was very happy with the resolution. Listen, it's a great ego boost for me to get this verdict. But ultimately, it would have been appealed. It would have taken longer to resolve. So I think we really got, based on my research, full value for this child to make his life easier. And he also gets entered into something called the New York State Medical Indemnity Fund, which is a fund that was set up in 2011 to really assist mostly hospitals, but any type of birth-related neurological injury can be qualified, whether it be a verdict or a settlement, to enter into this fund to pay for future healthcare costs.
Wow.
So his future healthcare costs, whether, in 20 years, if he has pancreatic cancer, it's going to be covered by this fund.
Wow.
So he's with Medicaid, he's in this fund, they pay for house modifications, they pay for pay to modify a van, therapy.
Right.
So he's going to be, his medical expenses and healthcare, residential care, home care is going to be covered. And the cash that we've obtained for him is going to supplement that. And the mother, Teresa, can actually be trained and qualified to be a home health aide and receive a rate that a home health aide.
Wow. And it can't be appealed by anybody?
Can't be appealed. No, we're done. Totally settled. Can't be appealed.
So it's a verdict, but it was settled? Sorry, I'm
correct. 100%. It's a verdict, but it was settled.
Okay.
And really the most interesting thing, and this comes back to why the amount is what the amount is. The defense attorney for Health and Hospitals Corporation during the trial, he referred to the prior pregnancy with Hakeem's older sister, where the cerclage was done previously, as a disaster, meaning that his definition of the disaster was it didn't go. The cerclage didn't seem to really work for her because she was still delivered prematurely, didn't go to full term. I kind of utilized that throughout the entirety of the trial. And I brought Lakima into the courtroom during my summations. And I pointed her out and I said, to the jury, I said, what this gentleman's referring to as a disaster is that beautiful young lady there.
Okay.
Who lives on her own, who's intellectually intact, who works, who's the best life she can live.
Yep.
And I thought that really impacted the jury.
Yeah, nice.
And I think the jury recognized that, this was a wake-up call, really, to the city of New York, that the healthcare for the residents in the Bronx have to improve, because it really became clear. And I told the jury, I don't think these doctors intentionally, I know they didn't intentionally want to hurt Hakeem or his mother. That's not what the trial was about. But I think she fell through the cracks and she was ignored. And the cerclage is supposed to be done, a prophylactic cerclage with this type of history she had between 13 and 16 weeks gestation, and it wasn't. And it wasn't until 21 weeks where they recognized that, oh my God, we have a huge problem here, that they intervened with something called a rescue cerclage, and it did not work.
Wow. So going back to like the whole area of law, tell me, and we can still talk about the case, but I'm just curious, like, what does it take, like, as like a personality wise, to like handle people when they come to you in like sometimes the worst moments of their life?
Well, certainly compassion, an interest in their story, an interest in them, and you have to have the desire within you,
right,
to want to help somebody. And obviously, I can't help them medically, regardless of how much I fancy myself to be knowledgeable about medicine. I'm not a doctor.
yeah,
But I really think that an interest in people, an interest in wanting to help people, and a compassionate heart, to listen to them and be honest. I have a lot of difficult discussions with people that I tell them I can't help them. That doesn't mean, you're free to go consult with other lawyers, and maybe someone else thinks they can. But
right.
that's the most difficult discussion to have. When someone comes to you in their time of need and you say, listen, I'm sorry, but based on my investigation, I just can't help you.
Right. So I understand. So what makes a good PI lawyer? Is it the same things that you just sort of mentioned?
Same thing. Yeah. Certainly an interest in people, an interest in working hard, not having a fear of standing up before a jury or a judge. A lot of people, that's not saying that I don't have butterflies in my stomach,
Yeah.
no matter how many times I've done it. But I would, on any day of the week, I would much rather be in a courtroom trying a case than sitting at my desk.
Yeah, that's awesome.
And I think people who feel like that, there's a lot of great trial lawyers. And I think people who feel like that, the trial, being a trial lawyer is meant for them. And my mentor, Jim Duffy, always say, he's not an attorney, he's a salesman. And that is really he's somewhat being self-deprecating because he had an unbelievable knowledge of the law, but you are doing sales. And if you're not willing to believe in what you're doing, because a jury can see if you're not a credible person, a jury can see right through you right away.
Well, I think, Jim, that's like a credit to you, because I there's a lot of firms out there, like personal injury firms, that take smaller cases and they kind of settle them. They like want to really settle. What you're telling us today is that, if you have a case, bring it to you, you're going to take it to court, because I think there are a lot of firms out there that do just, they settle. And I think that's okay. I think because they want to get what's in the best interest of their clients.
Listen, I'll describe it this way, because I settle a lot of cases. But you have to be willing to take something to court if you have to.
Right.
And if you believe that it's necessary to take it to court, you have to have the knowledge, the wherewithal, the fortitude to take it to court when you have to. There's nothing wrong with settling a case, especially if you're getting a fair value for it. It's really beneficial for everybody involved because, again, there's no trial, and a jury could do anything, until the jury comes back with the verdict. Even though I felt like the case has gone pretty well, I have no idea what the jury's going to do. I mean, if you ever hear a trial attorney say, "I've never lost a case," it's only because they haven't tried enough cases.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. I get it. Yeah.
But certainly, whether it's a small case or a big case, If the settlement is in the client's best interest and you think it's reasonable based on the facts and the injuries, then there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to have the fortitude to take a case to trial. If insurance, listen, they're data-driven people, insurance companies, so they know exactly who takes cases to trial, who gets what verdict, who they can settle things. So if attorneys think that insurance companies aren't using data like every other corporation in America to make determinations on settlement offers, on what to do here and there, then they're kidding themselves.
Like on what attorney's going to take what to court, that sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. And sometimes the data just may be knowledge.
Right.
Either a database or just, I live in a very small world. There's not that many attorneys who do plaintiff's medical malpractice in New York. There's not a lot. I know every defense attorney who does it. So it's the same firms on every case, same insurance companies. Okay. So you know who you are and what you're willing to do or not do.
Gotcha. That's really interesting. I think that's like good advice too, for any attorney starting out. Start strong. Get that reputation up there. Go to court. Don't be afraid to do it. So, is there anything else about the Hakeem case you want to tell us about that we might have missed out on?
No, I think we covered pretty much all. It just, it was a really interesting case that lasted, like I said, 5 weeks. The jury was really engaged on time every day. Yeah. And, you're living on, every day I'm on the seat of my pants. We started with 4 alternates. In New York, 6 jurors are on the main panel, and it only takes 5, 6 to agree on any question on the verdict sheet. But we had 4 alternates. We lost 2 alternates, actually 3 alternates during the course of the case. Really? And you're always worried if someone develops COVID, then you have to bust the panel. That could be 3 weeks into the trial. And so it was a lot of tension, a lot of stress. But I'm just really happy that the jury saw through a lot of the defenses and believed in my client, believed in what the proper medicine was, and returned this fantastic verdict, which resulted in a great settlement for my client, where I can never make him like you and me. All right. I can never bring him to, talk and not be uncoordinated and be intellectually intact. Right. I can't do that, but his mom is going to be able to get him out of an apartment in the Bronx. They're going to be able to buy, hopefully, the trust that's going to be set up to manage the money. Can purchase a home. It's amazing. Him to be in, so he can be in a yard and run around and just have the best life he could have.
And you know why? That's all because of you. You went there. You went to trial. You got him. The best that you could. And so, congratulations to you, Jim.
Thank you. There's a lot of great people in my office that invested a lot of time over the years.
Well, you and your team. Yes. You're a leader of your team. So, congratulations to you and your team.
Thank you very much, Benny. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Are there any other cases that you want to tell us about that might be in the works, or anything else that you're taking on that's interesting?
Yeah, we always have interesting things. I have actually another trial coming up involving a cerclage again in a competent cervix. So, funny that I have about 3 cases like that in my office, and now it looks like I'm going to be trying 2 of them back to back. So, that's where we are.
That's awesome. So is there anything else that you left out today, like that you want to tell the Lawyer Stories community? Any advice? I don't want to leave anything out or undiscussed. Or
no, I think we really covered it all, and I really appreciate you interviewing me and me being part of the Lawyer Stories. It's awesome. It's a great podcast, so I appreciate it, Betty.
Thanks so much. I'd love to continue to connect. I don't know if you're out there on social media. I think we connected today on LinkedIn, but I'd like to stay in touch and make sure I see what other good things you're doing and how else you're helping people. I think it's super important.
Thank you, Benny. I really appreciate it. I love what I do. So hopefully that came across.
That's awesome. It totally did. Stay right there. Thanks everybody for tuning in, and wherever you are in the world today, enjoy yourselves. Cheers.